Well, I tell you, the first time I heard about the Capable study, I just thought it was simply elegant, and it was so respectful. I mean, it really ties in with what Dr. Solomon says, the 3 R's. So it's relevant, it's respectful, it's responsible, and I just had to have you come back and speak to everybody here, because I think it's the same work that you all are very capable of doing, and using your innovation and being respectful and hearing the voice of the patients that we serve. So I'm hoping, yes, thank you so much. So our next speaker is Dr. Teshia Solomon, who is the director of the Native American Research and Training Center and an associate professor in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Arizona. And her talk is entitled Race and the U.S. Health Science Workforce, the 3 R's, respect, relevancy, and responsibility. Let me see if I can get this up. Here's so okay, walk around. You got it?
Lower everything. How's that?
Can you all hear?
So first of all, could we just applaud Sarah one more time? I mean, Dr. Belcher and I went to dinner last night, and I told her I've probably changed my talk 3 times. I'm still not sure it's where I wanted it to be, but I think I see a thread. Thank you for tying it together, but I see a different thread that I think we'll run through, and it's the idea of simplicity. So good morning. I think it's like 9:30 or something here, which is like 6:30 my time. I'm not used to speaking to anyone except my dog until 8. So forgive me for that. So let me start with a halito, buenos dias, and hey y'all, how you doing? And tell you that I am the great-granddaughter of Lila and Forbes Manning, the original enrollees of the Choctaw Nation, and I am the granddaughter of Trinidad and Rosa Arambula from Durango, Mexico, and my parents are Louis and Jerry Arambula of Oklahoma. And I have a dog. I have no children, but I have greats. And these are my little greats, and I took a tour of the greats this past August. So Dean on the left, Noodle, and then Stetson and Leighton. So these are the reminders of why we are really what we're really about in life. Harolyn did the intro. I'll just simply tell you that I have several training projects and some community engagement projects that I do right now, and an asthma project that I'm working on. And today I'm going to talk about what we're doing through the American Indian Alaska Native experience. And so it's very, very specific to the community that I work with, but many, many things are parallel to any other disenfranchised group that you can conceive of. So I'll start with giving you some stats. Then American Indians and Alaska Natives comprise about 1.6% of the U.S. population. That's census data. And we all have some concerns about census data, but we use what we got. By 2020, we have an expectation in Arizona that we will have a shortage of 40,000 physicians, and a great number of those will be in rural areas. That is something that remains across the country, I think, that rural areas struggle to get all kinds of healthcare providers. And then you see here on this slide the kinds of graduates we have, the American Indian Alaska Native graduates. 0.3% of graduates are physicians. Science and engineering, or what we call the STEM field. Registered nurses at 1%, and then public health graduates 0.75%. And we have to pull these from different sources, so they're, again, statistics on American Indians, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, all the others, the others in the room. So it's kind of hard to get good data, but this is the data we have. And if you can see that teeny tiny red sliver of the pie, that's, I think it's the red one. Yeah, American Indian and Alaska Natives. 100 out of 38,300 in science and engineering doctorates in 2013 went to American Indians and Alaska Natives. So you see the disparities here. U.S. physicians by race and ethnicity. So just getting people trained, getting them out in the workforce, we have a struggle, and our struggle is numbers. Not just getting people to it, but there's an absolute number, and the number is very low. Public health school graduates, which is actually the area that we do best in, 0.5% American Indian Alaska Native, and 0.3% are in Hopi group. So I'm going to start with a little history lesson because I think that will give you a nice slide into Dr. Williams' talk. And this is a TED Talk by Aaron Huey. And, oops. So now how do I get down to that thing? How about like this? Okay. Where'd it go? Come back. I need a touchpad. There we go. I need a 4-year-old to operate it is what I need. And play, right?
I'm here today to show my photographs of the Lakota. Now, many of you may have heard of the Lakota, or at least the larger group of tribes called the Sioux. The Lakota are one of many tribes that were moved off their land to prisoner of war camps, now called reservations. The Pine Ridge Reservation, the subject of today's slideshow, is located about 75 miles southeast of the Black Hills in South Dakota. It is sometimes referred to as prisoner of war camp number 334, and is where the Lakota now live. Now, if any of you have ever heard of AIM, the American Indian Movement, or of Russell Means, or Leonard Peltier, or of the standoff at Oglala, then you know that Pine Ridge is ground zero for Native issues in the U.S. So I've been asked to talk a little bit today about my relationship with the Lakota, and that's a very difficult one for me, because if you haven't noticed from my skin color, I'm white, and that is a huge barrier on a Native reservation. You'll see a lot of people in my photographs today, and I've become very close with them, and they've welcomed me like family. They've called me brother and uncle, and invited me again and again over 5 years. But on Pine Ridge, I will always be what is called Washy Chew. And Washy Chew is a Lakota word that means non-Indian, but another version of this word means the one who takes the best meat for himself. And that's what I want to focus on, the one who takes the best part of the meat. It means greedy. So take a look around this auditorium today. We are at a private school in the American West, sitting in red velvet chairs with money in our pockets. And if we look at our lives, we have indeed taken the best part of the meat. So let's look today at a set of photographs of a people who lost so that we could gain. And know that when you see these people's faces, that these are not just images of the Lakota. They stand for all indigenous people. On this piece of paper is the history the way I learned it from my Lakota friends and family. The following is a timeline of treaties made, treaties broken, and massacres disguised as battles. I'll begin in 1824. What is known as the Bureau of Indian Affairs was created within the War Department, setting an early tone of aggression in our dealings with the Native Americans. 1851, the first Treaty of Fort Laramie was made, clearly marking the boundaries of the Lakota Nation. According to the treaty, those lands are a sovereign nation. If the boundaries of this treaty had held, and there is a legal basis that they should, then this is what the U.S. would look like today. 10 years later, the Homestead Act, signed by President Lincoln, unleashed a flood of white settlers into native lands. 1863, An uprising of Santee Sioux in Minnesota ends with the hanging of 38 Sioux men, the largest mass execution in U.S. history. The execution was ordered by President Lincoln only 2 days after he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. 1866, the beginning of the Transcontinental Railroad, a new era. We appropriated land for trails and trains to shortcut through the heart of the Lakota Nation. The treaties were out the window. In response, 3 tribes led by the Lakota chief Red Cloud attacked and defeated the U.S. Army many times over. I want to repeat that part. The Lakota defeat the U.S. Army. 1868, the Second Fort Laramie Treaty clearly guarantees the sovereignty of the Great Sioux Nation and the Lakota's ownership of the sacred Black Hills. The government also promises land and hunting rights in the surrounding states. We promise that the Powder River country will henceforth be closed to all whites. The treaty seemed to be a complete victory for Red Cloud and the Sioux. In fact, this is the only war in American history in which the government negotiated a peace by conceding everything demanded by the enemy. 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. It began carrying, among other things, large numbers of hunters who began the wholesale killing of buffalo, eliminating a source of food, clothing, and shelter for the Sioux. 1871, the Indian Appropriation Act makes all Indians wards of the federal government. In addition, the military issued orders forbidding Western Indians from leaving reservations. All Western Indians at that point in time were now prisoners of war. Also in 1871, we ended the time of treaty making. The problem with treaties is that they allow tribes to exist as sovereign nations, and we can't have that. We had plans. 1874, General George Custer announced the discovery of gold in Lakota territory, specifically the Black Hills. The news of gold creates a massive influx of white settlers into Lakota Nation. Custer recommends that Congress find a way to end the treaties with the Lakota as soon as possible. 1875, the Lakota War begins over the violation of the Fort Laramie Treaty. 1876, on July 26th, on its way to attack a Lakota village, Custer's 7th Cavalry was crushed at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. 1877, the great Lakota warrior-in-chief named Crazy Horse surrendered at Fort Robinson. He was later killed while in custody. 1877 is also the year we found a way to get around the Fort Laramie treaties. A new agreement was presented to Sioux chiefs and their leading men under a campaign known as Sell or Starve. Sign the paper or no food for your tribe. Only 10% of the adult male population signed. The Fort Laramie Treaty called for at least 3/4 of the tribe to sign away land. That clause was obviously ignored. 1887, the Dawes Act. Communal ownership of reservation lands ends. Reservations are cut up into 160-acre sections and distributed to individual Indians with a surplus disposed of. Tribes lost millions of acres. The American dream of individual land ownership turned out to be a very clever way to divide the reservation until nothing was left. The move destroyed the reservations, making it easier to further subdivide and to sell with every passing generation. Most of the surplus land and many of the plots within reservation boundaries are now in the hands of white ranchers. Once again, the fat of the land goes to Washy Chew. 1890, a date I believe to be the most important in this slideshow. This is the year of the Wounded Knee Massacre. On December 29th, U.S. troops surrounded a Sioux encampment at Wounded Knee Creek and massacred Chief Bigfoot and 300 prisoners of war using a new rapid-fire weapon that fired exploding shells called a Hotchkiss gun. For this so-called battle, 20 Congressional Medals of Honor for Valor were given to the 7th Cavalry. To this day, this is the most Medals of Honor ever awarded for a single battle. More Medals of Honor were given for the indiscriminate slaughter of women and children than for any battle in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan. The Wounded Knee Massacre is considered the end of the Indian Wars. Whenever I visit the site of the mass grave at Wounded Knee, I see it not just as a grave for the Lakota or for the Sioux, but as a grave for all indigenous peoples. The holy man Black Elk said, I did not know then how much was ended. When I look back now from this high hill of my old age, I can still see the butchered women and children lying heaped and scattered all along the crooked gulch. As plain as when I saw them with eyes still young. And I can see that something else died there in the bloody mud and was buried in the blizzard. A people's dream died there, and it was a beautiful dream. With this event, a new era in Native American history began. Everything can be measured before Wounded Knee and after, because it was in this moment, with the fingers on the triggers of the Hotchkiss guns, that the U.S. government openly declared its position on Native rights. They were tired of treaties. They were tired of sacred hills. They were tired of ghost dances. They were tired of all the inconveniences of the Sioux. So they brought out their cannons. You want to be an Indian now, they said? Finger on the trigger. (1900). The U.S. Indian population reached its low point, less than 250,000, compared to an estimated 8 million in 1492. Fast forward, 1980, the longest running court case in U.S. history, the Sioux Nation versus the United States, was ruled upon by the U.S. Supreme Court. The court determined that when the Sioux were resettled onto reservations and 7 million acres of their land were opened up to prospectors and homesteaders, the terms of the Second Fort Laramie Treaty had been violated. The court stated that the Black Hills were illegally taken and that the initial offering price plus interest should be paid to the Sioux Nation. As payment for the Black Hills, the court awarded only $106 million to the Sioux Nation. The Sioux refused the money with the rallying cry, "The Black Hills are not for sale." 2010. Statistics about Native population today, more than a century after the massacre at Wounded Knee, reveal the legacy of colonization, forced migration, and treaty violations. Unemployment on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation fluctuates between 85 and 90%. The housing office is unable to build new structures, and existing structures are falling apart. Many are homeless, and those with homes are packed into rotting buildings with up to 5 families. 39% of homes on Pine Ridge have no electricity. At least 60% of the homes on the reservation are infested with black mold. More than 90% of the population lives below the federal poverty line. The tuberculosis rate on Pine Ridge is approximately 8 times higher than the U.S. national average. The infant mortality rate is the highest on this continent and is about 3 times higher than the U.S. national average. Cervical cancer is 5 times higher than the U.S. national average. The school dropout rate is up to 70%. Teacher turnover is 8 times higher than the U.S. national average. Frequently, grandparents are raising their grandchildren because parents, due to alcoholism, domestic violence, and general apathy, cannot raise them. 50% of the population over the age of 40 suffers from diabetes. The life expectancy for men is between 46 and 48 years old, roughly the same as Afghanistan and Somalia. The last chapter in any successful genocide is the one in which the oppressor can remove their hands and say, "My God, what are these people doing to themselves? They're killing each other. They're killing themselves while we watch them die." This is how we came to own these United States. This is the legacy of Manifest Destiny. Prisoners are still born into prisoner of war camps long after the guards are gone. These are the bones left after the best meat has been taken. A long time ago, a series of events was set in motion by a people who look like me, by Washy Chew, eager to take the land and the water and the gold in the hills. Those events led to a domino effect that has yet to end. As removed as we, the dominant society, may feel from a massacre in 1890 or a series of broken treaties 150 years ago, I still have to ask you the question, how should you feel about the statistics of today? What is the connection between these images of suffering and the history that I just read to you? And how much of this history do you need to own even? Is any of this your responsibility today? I have been told that there must be something we can do. There must be some call to action. Because for so long I've been standing on the sidelines, content to be a witness, just taking photographs. Because the solution seems so far in the past, I needed nothing short of a time machine to access them. The suffering of indigenous peoples is not a simple issue to fix. It's not something everyone can get behind, the way they get behind helping Haiti, or ending AIDS, or fighting a famine. The fix, as it's called, may be much more difficult for the dominant society than, say, a $50 check, or a church trip to paint some graffiti-covered houses, or a suburban family donating a box of clothes they don't even want anymore. So where does that leave us? Shrugging our shoulders in the dark? The United States continues on a daily basis to violate the terms of the 1851 and 1868 Fort Laramie treaties with the Lakota. The call to action I offer today, my TED wish, is this: honor the treaties. Give back the Black Hills. It's not your business what they do with them.
All right, where's that little, there it is. So this talk was given in 2012, and it needs some updating, and which I just thought I'm going to turn into a student project. And because the Native people that I show this video to like it, but want to show some of the resilience and some of the beauty that exists in our communities. So the reason I show this is so you can get a Reader's Digest version of American Indian history. What happened to the Lakota is each tribe has its own story. It is unique, but also very similar. So those historical U.S. policies occurred at a national level, and they impacted everyone, perhaps in a different way. And what I'm looking for you to understand and to hear is how we got to the health status that we're in today. And so if you listened to the words and you were unable to see the pictures, because Aaron is a photographer, if you listened to the words, what you would have heard was the history and the timeline. And I want to juxtapose that to the losses that occurred. So war, a policy of war, killed thousands of people, particularly young men. And with that, we lost our men, so we lost our leaders. We lost our dignity and possessions. Women were raped, and people were held captive. The forced removal, where people were removed from their lands, such as the land rushes in the Oklahoma lands, and through relocation. We lost our land, we lost our homes, the freedom, the foods that were hunted, gathered, and grown. So those things that fed and sustained us and kept us healthy. Moving to reservations, not being allowed to leave was a loss of freedom and the skills in navigation that were natural to indigenous peoples. There were policies of forced sterilization, policies of adoption, non-native, well, white people, because at the time, just white people were allowed to adopt Indian kids. And with that, we lost our families, our culture, our traditions, and our language. Many Native people were put into boarding schools. And boarding schools were a place, for many schools, were a place of abuse. People were not allowed to practice their religion. Religions were, the Sundance that he spoke of, were outlawed. They were forced into a new religion, whatever that boarding school happened to be. They were not allowed to speak their language. They were beaten if they spoke their language. There were problems with sexual abuse and physical abuse within boarding schools, and through that losing dignity and losing the sense of safety that they had. So now if you think about the pictures that you saw, because for the most part they're very, that's what grabs you. That's what makes your mouth hang open when you see them. And I want to say those are the impact of the losses that have been experienced. So the concept of intergenerational trauma and the concept of epigenetics showing us that this is passed in our genes from generation to generation, that concept is currently under exploration now, but it's something we believe will prove true. The loss of physical health, talked about diabetes rates, cardiovascular disease, and asthma, some of the highest rates in the country. A loss of spiritual health, your sense of who you are, your place, your purpose. And this leads to having one of the most outrageous suicide rates in the country. War, unintentional injuries, high rates of poverty. The stress of living in a different society with a different set of values, so the prejudice, the racism, discrimination, subordination, violence, rape, abuse, and murder that continue today. And again, Native families being encouraged to put their children up for adoption even today because of the home situations. And so when I talked about simplicity, so what's the answer? What's the cure? And we believe that culture is our cure. The simplicity. I wish I were a genius, a MacArthur genius, one of those nice Nobel Prizes, you know. Sarah's study. Is it genius? It's genius because it's so simple. Give them a banister to hold on to when they go up and down the stairs. It's not rocket science. Doesn't require a $40 million funding mechanism from the NIH. It's just incredibly simple. So if we put back what was taken away, health and healing will occur. Our men will heal from substance abuse problems and rehab from the prisons that they're put in. If we give back land for food, people will enjoy the foods that they grew up on and not be living on Tostitos and Dr. Pepper. And also that allows for enterprise. You've seen around the country some of the movement towards green markets or neighborhood markets or farmers markets. That's an enterprise that brings income. Homes that are non-toxic in safe neighborhoods. So when you're directed by the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which originated in what department in the United States? The Department of War. Hey, that's not warm and fuzzy, y'all. Come on. Nobody feels safe with that. The capacity to hunt. We still have tribes that are subsistence farmers, and they fight annually with how many salmon they can take out of the water, how many whales they can hunt, how many moose they can hunt, whatever it is within their community. And some of those communities depend on that food for their survival. The ability to build your own home. So some of the reservations laws don't allow you to own land. Land is communally held, not individually held. It's an entire process to put a house. Plus, there's no infrastructure. It would take you cost a fortune to build a small house because there's no way to get the lumber and all the supplies and equipment to those communities. We're talking about some communities that don't have running water. Did you know that exists in the United States? Yeah, we still have places that don't have running water. But mostly people want to do their cultural ceremonies. They want to have their spirit back. So just practicing those, and many of one of my elders told me that they're down to only one ceremony. They only know one ceremony. Of all the ceremonies they had that went along with the seasons of harvest or the seasons of development, they're down to one. honoring families, giving back traditional activities, sports, and play. All of them taught us 2 games, which I think our students were quite interested in. There's a women play a game that looks a little bit like lacrosse. It's made with a cactus stick, but you use a rock as the puck, I guess you would say. And the men do one that looks a little bit like soccer, except for you run barefoot in the desert, okay, first of all. And then second of all, again, the ball that you're kicking is a rock. So we had a little bit of blood after that one. The men did not play as long as the women did. Giving back our language. Some people's language and religion are so intertwined that the two, to give up one is to give up the other. Teach spiritual meaning in ways, principles, and values, and provide the experiential teaching methodologies that go along with that. And so these are the things we try to do in my center. So I want to have you think about culture for a second. This was given to me by one of my traditional healers that I work with. And it's this iceberg concept of culture. So above the water, like with the iceberg, there's this recognizable thing that you're trying to avoid hitting. And that's where you can see art, literature, drama, music, dancing, games, cooking, dress. There are all these obvious things. But what you don't see, what's more obscure below the water, are the concepts of behaviors and values of a community. So modesty, the concept of beauty. Did you know that not everybody believes that a tall blonde with straight hair, or in my generation it was twiggy, was the concept of beauty? There are some places that have a different perspective. What is sin, or in other words, wrongdoing? How you approach that from a justice system, concepts of courtship, concepts of cleanliness, leadership, hierarchical relationships. All of these things can be viewed differently by different communities, and they are the things that are harder to see and harder to learn about. They require you to be a part of that community and working with them. So I wanted to talk about 3 cultural concepts, and Carolyn, you're going to keep me on task because I'm not exactly sure how long this one is. I could have like 5 R's or 7 R's because there's a lot of R's, but I chose 3: respect, relevance, and responsibility. And it must have been because I had a bug up my you-know-what one day when I wrote that. So respect. Respect is the core foundation of all of our relationships. With Native communities, I introduced you how? By telling you my relations, right? So all of those relationships, all of that, giving respect back. We start with gratitude, thanking Carolyn for letting us be here. I don't know if I did that because I started talking. I was so excited about Sarah's talk. So thank you for the invitation, by the way. Being honest, when we do research, when we deliver care, as students working with folks, we need to be honest, trustworthy, and honor our obligations and promises. This history that we showed you is a lack of all of these things, and therefore it is seen as a lack of respect. And with that goes a lack of trust. Often people, Native people, not everyone, but often people have a lack of trust for the federal government, the state government, individuals, specifically people who give care, researchers, all of this, because we have not had a history of honoring these things and giving respect. Many Native communities go with a consensus approach, which is a sign that we value all ideas and each person. So everyone's idea is heard, and we try and all come together and make one decision. This, in terms of research, this takes a long time. You have to be willing to wait. Generosity and sharing. Aaron talked about taking only what you need. That's a sign of respect, that you only take what you need. 4 donuts in the box? Come on, you don't need 4, right? You don't need 1 actually, but you might want just 1, right? So maybe it's a half, maybe it's one. And leave the rest for other people and share with those people. Respect for process procedure. So this is one where my colleagues have a little bit of trouble, and it's kind of driven by the system we have of getting our funding from the National Institutes of Health or other resources that say you only have 5 years for this project. You must hurry. Precision medicine. You must hurry. You must collect all of these samples. Well, guess what, guys? It takes a year, 2 years to work with tribes through their consultation process. So I'm not sure I can deliver that in 5 years. Besides that, they don't want to fund you to just talk to people. They want to see those publications, right? They want to see that data. Well, when you work with communities, you must respect the process and the procedure, because that goes back to showing I value your ideas and your thoughts. The same thing that Sarah said in letting the individual patient select their own goals. It's the same situation, making sure the community has that same opportunity. It's a concept of respect. The idea that scientific knowledge is no more valuable than traditional wisdom. And that's easy to say and easy to practice here in this room. But when you get a call, like I did while I was away, from a man who says he wanted to talk to me because he was cured from cancer, I don't remember what kind of cancer, he told me pancreatic, I think it was, in 2 days, and he wanted to share that story with me. It's hard for me to believe that, right? But maybe it's the case, so I have to listen. I have to hear what his story is and value that, because I have seen miracles happen, and I have been, miracles have happened to me, so I know it's a possibility. I believe, where's Carolyn's husband? Anyway, we were talking. Oh, there he is. we were talking earlier, and he said he ran into a Navajo man, and that we were talking about elders, and the information that Sarah delivered was about elders, and we're here to tell you that elders hold a lot of knowledge. Sometimes it's got a little diabetic dementia in there too, but they have a wisdom that you really want to cherish and honor. And in Native communities, elders are held up in esteem. And our veterans are our warriors. And veterans also hold a special place in the hearts of Native people. So think about it for just a second here. I gave you that history of the American Army, the U.S. Army, and what it did, being in the Department of War. And yet, Native American communities offer up more people to the service than any other ethnic group, percentage-wise, not in numbers. And it makes no sense. It makes no sense that you would want to support this country that did so much to actually kill you. It's called genocide, yeah. Actually kill you, your family, your ancestry. So that warrior gene is pervasive in our communities, and I shake my head at it, but you honor it. All life is sacred. Everything. Every single cell is considered sacred. The life of the turtle, the life of the whale, the life of the elk, all of those are as important as your life. Nothing has a higher value in the eye of the Creator, and it is all one complete system that works together. In respect, do not walk on other people's words. So we also have a tendency to, when someone's talking, to interrupt. Gotta get our word in? Oh, especially if you want to succeed in a place like Hopkins, I'm guessing, huh? You're in a meeting, you want to get your idea in, you gotta jump in there, am I right? Uh-huh, yeah. I have actually seen it, so I know it's true. So it's really hard. It's really hard. I was trying to think of where I was. I sat on one of the moonshot task force, which is hard enough because you're on the phone, right? So nobody can see you jumping up. Ooh, pick me. Nobody can see that, and it sounds really ridiculous amongst scientists to say, ooh, let me pick Go me, let me go, let me go. So for me, it was a matter of saying when I had a chance, saying what I had to say, but then turning around and emailing right away. Emailing it. Sometimes I text during the meeting to the key person. I'm going to talk now, I'm going to talk now. But it's very hard, and you want to listen to what everyone else has said before you. And sometimes in a meeting, a council meeting, you'll hear, maybe I say something, and the guy next to me then says that same thing, and I'll think, well, I just said that. They're not actually disrespecting you. They're honoring you by saying they agree with you, and by repeating it over and over, you hear the same main points being said again and again. We don't intrude in personal space, so whatever your space is that's needed, particularly when you're delivering care, honor. If that person keeps stepping back, quit coming up closer to them, right? Because they need that space, they need that distance. And again, we don't disagree. We try to offer an alternate opinion because your opinion is good and it has merit, but maybe I have a different idea. So in terms of diversity in the workplace, I want to remind everyone to respect the mission. It's very hard, or very easy rather, for us to get off mission, to think that what we're about is, I brought in the $4 million grant. It's important because it keeps us employed, it keeps us moving forward. But the mission is to deliver health care. The institution was put here to deliver health care, to improve the well-being of people, and to provide education. That's why we're here. Otherwise, we could be making and selling widgets. So remember the mission, respect the mission, respect your purpose. So relevance. Relevance says things are meaningful. We may have meaningful research, we have meaningful work, and meaningful care. A diverse workforce requires meaningful. We are people who are passionate. I work in the Department of Family and Community Medicine. Nobody really cares about the dollars in a state institution of that kind that's delivering that kind of care to the population we do. Unfortunately, it's required of us. But when they talk about the people, the patients. How do we deliver better care? We address the needs of the community. What's relevant to the community? What's relevant in Sarah's study was the ability to get up and have some dignity. As all these young faces, they don't know yet. You'll know, you'll learn, it's coming. The ability to go to the bathroom by yourself. Wow. The ability to wash your own hair. So what's important to that community or to that individual patient? How does it impact their lives? We could change lives. You know, technology has changed lives, changed our pattern of behavior. Has it made our lives better? Depends. Is my calendar, is everything syncing? Yeah. So in a big sense, has it made your life better? Or is it the simple things that make our lives big impact? We wrote a paper on debunking. That was the word I was looking for. Debunking the stereotype of the drunken Indian. It's a huge stereotype. I experienced it more in Arizona than I ever have before. And that paper, which was, we were really looking for liver cancer rates and what was causing liver cancer problems. We ended up with this data on alcohol. I did all of these interviews on the phone, on radios and television and newspapers. And the power of that one paper, the power for me to say to someone, this is not your destiny, and it never was. The alcohol problem is no different for American Indians than it is for whites. Is it a problem? Yes. But you, as an American Indian, are not predestined to be a drunk. I had people cry on the phone and say that had freed up their lives. That's a big impact. All I did was ask Jim to run some numbers because it didn't make any sense to me. Jim ran the numbers, and this is what we came up with, and we were able to shake people's lives. Be open, honest, clear, and have frequent communication. Never make promises that can't be kept, treaties. Disseminate findings clearly and in terms understandable to all. Give the information that you learn. You're here at Hopkins. You're going to do papers. Papers are the currency of institutions and scientists. But go back to the people you work with and tell them what you're doing and tell them what you've learned. You can do it now in so many ways due to technology, but let them know that they made a difference in your life and how they might have made a difference in other people's lives. Make it relevant to them to want to participate in what you do, whether it's education. This makes for a diverse group of people who want to come to college, who want to study science. This is how you build a diverse community. Make research results useful to the tribes for other purposes. So maybe what you're looking at was about one thing, but it might be transferable to another. So now responsibility, and I'm going to quote Spider-Man here because why wouldn't I? Especially as students, we don't think we have any power, but you do. You have a voice. Even if it's a very small voice, you have a voice, you have an opportunity. And with that comes the responsibility that your voice is the best that you know and the best that you can do, that it's grounded in a sense of community, that you're responsible for yourself, but also for that tribe or that community that you come from. Many of us are responsible for our extended families. Many of my students, while they're going to school, are also raising children, raising their grandchildren, responsible for their parents, and I mean bringing in the money on what I pay them as a student stipend. It's not an easy thing. If you're an outsider and you walk into that community and you're engaging that community, you are implicitly agreeing to have a responsibility to that community for the work that you do there. And so you don't publish or speak without first getting the agreement of those community members. So when in a study you change personnel, that could mean failure in responsibility. You have to be very careful. And trust comes not at the start of something, but at the end, once you've met your obligations and met your responsibility. I personally believe that families loan us the gift of their children when they send them to college, and that we are responsible for them. They are granting us this gift of their most precious belongings. Sometimes they're sending them all the way across the country. Sometimes it's just down the road, but it still feels like all the way across the country. And as faculty, it is our responsibility not only for their education in an academic sense, but the education as human beings, as citizens of the world. We're responsible for their safety, and we're responsible for their future. So what does a diverse health science workforce look like? How do we create that? We create institutions that thrive on cooperation, not competition. We build compassion and altruism and allow for diversity and social change. We have a responsibility to ensure the physical and psycho-emotional safety of our students and university community, to do all in our power to assist those who may suffer. So no gay child should ever feel like they are not safe, I mean physically safe, but also mean emotionally safe and psychologically safe. That my ideas or a transgendered person's ideas are just as important as anyone else's in the room. That applies to anybody. I was just using that as an example. That we institute policies, procedures, and programs that create a safe, diverse, and inclusive environment in which to live, work, and study. So let's not just talk about it. Let's see it on paper. Let's make it reality. That we embrace the concepts of reward and punishment, that we have role modeling, reciprocity, and other mechanisms that create more altruistic societies in our academic centers that reward inclusion, compassion, and diversity as specific criteria for hiring faculty and staff, and in scholarship and leadership with promotion and tenure. That we offer courses that are culturally competent, curriculum programs, seminars that appeal to and attract students, and a diverse faculty. If you want to have diverse people in your institution, offer them things they're interested in, make it relevant. Feature distinguished speakers on the diversity and inclusion concepts from diverse disciplines. So people on neuroscience, theology, economics, health, law, everyone from different fields comes with a slightly different perspective. So it'd be interesting to hear what diversity and inclusion means to them. Create fellowships to study the effects of diversity and inclusion on the school and on the workforce. Create a critical mass of agents of change with a focus or interest in these areas, and concepts that engage faculty, staff, students, and community, including your alumni, your retired faculty, and in my case, our community. Offer leadership programs that are grounded in compassion, empathy, altruism, social entrepreneurship, and root concepts that promote diversity and inclusion. The ability to think that we all matter comes from this basic premise that you care about other people. So we have to make that what people want to be, what's expected, as opposed to perhaps some of the ideals that are being promoted, particularly in this election period. Develop a strategic plan to create an environment that rewards diversity and inclusion. By having a plan, putting it in place, everyone is on board. Don't forget, we are purpose-driven, we are passion-driven, culture is our cure, and leave room for joy and irreverence. What the heck? All right. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Sure. Sure. And I would say that there's, okay. I got that. My last name's Jackson. We got it on lock. No. And your words really touched me because I know how hard it is to recruit Native American students, even as University of Arizona was surrounded by the Tohono O'odham, by the San Javier, by the Pasquayaqui, and by Navajo communities. And I was wondering, what were your, or do you have insights on how to increase the number of Native American students who are at universities, including here, because we're also surrounded by Native communities, you know?
So we do have a couple of programs that we we have increased our American Indian Alaska Native medical students to a cohort from 3 about 2 years ago to 20. So 3 to 20, I know it's not a big number, but do the ratio for me, folks, okay? It's huge. It's huge. And so there are a couple of things that we do. 1, offer scholarships. 2, we create an environment in which they are welcome and hell-bent on success. So we give, I don't want to call it remedial, but a lot of our schools, are we being recorded? A lot of our schools are challenged to graduate students that have the kinds of math skills, science skills, writing skills that are required for an undergraduate program, much less the competitive graduate programs and professional programs that we offer. And so we have programs that take students for a year and focus on those and create assets. So it's kind of a catch-up year. It's a year to catch up, get ready. One of them is called PMAP. I have no idea what that stands for at the moment, but it's something like Pathway to the Medical Professions or something. If you pass that, you get not only a graduate degree in some kind of medical sciences, and then you're automatically accepted into the university's medical school program. It is competitive, but that has made a huge difference. We have a program called Indians to Medicine that is funded by the Indian Health Service, and getting the voice out there, recruiting young people, giving them the role models that they can succeed, showing people, live human beings that have succeeded, telling those stories and getting them out there. So it's all around letting students know, giving them role models, and then boosting them up. And all the way through, we even have junior faculty fellowship programs. We do all of this, just move everybody up, give them the support they need. At the faculty levels, graduate school levels, it tends to be writing. So all that paper writing I talked about, we try and get people. In fact, I'm hosting a writing retreat in October to get my junior faculty published, get the papers out. So yeah, things like that. And you're right. We should be embarrassed at the University of Arizona that we don't have that easy access to Native people, that we don't have better numbers. But sometimes it's fear. It's fear that you can't succeed. So we want to tell the stories that they can.
Dr. Solomon?
Yes.
I don't want to walk on your words, so. So one other thing I think that we have done in some of our programs, like the MCH Rise Up, is instead of taking the federal dollars, it's a CDC-funded grant, instead of taking the federal dollars and putting it all in Baltimore, we have 3 sites. So we have a site that is at University of South Dakota that partners with Pine Ridge, and so we send students out to the reservations, and many of the students did not know just the type of poverty without running water, electricity sometimes, and they get to see firsthand that we have right in the United States areas of severe need. So I have the Native American students, some of them who have in college have children, their own children. They're saying they're so grateful to have us have a program with faculty that is close to where they live on the reservation, that they feel that was so respectful rather than to have it East Coast or West Coast, to have it in Indian country. So that's the other thing. The model may be a little bit more expensive, but I feel it's very valuable, and I feel people even who are not from the reservation, who have gone there and worked with people in the community, it's been life-changing for them to be there. So I think, just increasing the awareness and what we do to help each other has made it very tremendous, and being, right there.
And I can give a shout out to Hopkins, even though you're a competitor, because we're building cooperation, right? So Allison Barlow, Dr. Allison Barlow was just named. The gentleman who was leading it has stepped down, retired. I can't remember how many years he's been in the Apache Reservation in Arizona, but you have a Center for American Indian Studies there, American Indian Health, I think it is, CAIH, and Dr. Allison Barlow is leading that up again. And then I don't know if you guys know this, but you're building facilities in Gallup as well. Gallup, New Mexico. I'm sorry, I say that like everybody knows where Gallup, New Mexico is. Gallup, New Mexico is used to be this little bitty town on the edge of the Navajo Reservation, just west of Albuquerque, like an hour or 2 hours west of Albuquerque. And so it sits right, it would be called a city if you were on Navajo, but it's just really a town that sits outside that is a great location. So you're going to pull in a lot of people that way as well. And Hopkins has been doing that program, the summer program, where Native people get scholarships to come here for that certificate program in the summer. And I've sent several people to that program as well. It's kind of a nice way to bump them up. It's more of public health, but it bumps them up to have a little bit of confidence that they can do other kinds of programs, other kinds of degrees. So thank you for your words. Yes, ma'am. Run, Forrest.
What sort of interactions, both good interactions or difficulties, do you see between immigrants coming, Latino immigrants coming, and the Native American population?
I personally haven't seen any. I don't know if you know anything about the policies of the state of Arizona and a young sheriff we have by the name of Joe Arpaio. So immigrants have gone underground, literally. Yeah. So Tucson in particular had a fairly active refugee program where we take refugees from Somalia. And I haven't paid attention to where that program is, but we have little neighborhoods of Somalian refugees. And then the immigration, I assume you're talking about the Mexican border as opposed to the Canadian border. Because Joe Arpaio's policies and Joe Arpaio is a sheriff in Phoenix area, and his policy, it is true that there's tunnels that went underground from Mexico into right up in the middle of the Bonautham Reservation up to the Phoenix as a major hub, catching that I-40 distribution for gun running and drug running. But that's not the people that walk across the desert trying to make a home in the United States to make a living. And so we have a huge problem with people who die along the way, or what we call coyotes, that people pay to bring them across, and then they fill them with trucks, and if they get stopped, they can possibly die just being locked in a truck. We have checkpoint stations on the Bonautham Reservation, and we used to have, under the George Bush administration, we had a lot of money going to Border Patrol. And by the way, there's already a fence. It already exists. I don't know if anyone's shown Donald that fence. But we have Border Patrol, we had Border Patrol stations, 4 of them, when I would drive from Tucson to San Diego, which skirts the border just past Yuma, or along Yuma. And I think that's down to 2 now. But the Native people, many of our Native people are also Mexican American, or Mexican. So the Bonautham Nation, which is the reservation that sits west and south of Tucson, the people, when you see their jewelry, so the jewelry I have on today is turquoise. This one's turquoise, which is a blue stone. And then this one's beads, but it's a delight from another community of the Pasquayaki Nation. The Pasquayaki and Bonautham are heavily influenced with a Latino or Mexican Latino presence. But the people, when you see some of their jewelry in the desert, right? We're desert, think this. Those is cactus, right? So that's where I live. That's the only place the saguaro grows in the world, in Tucson, in the Sonoran Desert. And you would think that the jewelry would be reflective of that. And there is some of that. But most of the jewelry is seashells. Because the territory that the people lived in ran from, I'm going to say the Sea of Cortez. Is that really over on the Pacific? Okay. The Sea of Cortez all the way up to Canada. So they ranged along that line. And just like the retirees now in Tucson area, you winter in the desert, you summer in the ocean or the cooler side of things. So it's not a novel idea. It's not anything. And the Navajo actually have a plan that's called the Mexican Plan. I don't know that story. I'd be interested in hearing it. Right there, baby. Respect. Start there. Go in knowing nothing, just like Sarah said. Know nothing. You know nothing. The years and the money you spent here, you know nothing. Because you haven't lived, you haven't walked in those shoes. So the first thing you do is turn these on and you listen. And learning to listen and learning to be quiet is a challenge because you just spent 4, 6, 8, 12, 16, whatever number of years it's been for you, learning to speak up, to be heard, right? Now you have to step back and you have to listen. It's hard for me. I had to do it last week. I was not good at it. I still had to tap my elder on the shoulder and say, so I could have a chance to say what I had to say because it was important for them to hear. But it's a challenge, and that's the first thing you can do is be yourself, your loving, generous self that you truly are, and listen and learn. You love to learn, or you wouldn't be in school this long. So go and learn.
I want to share a concept that there's only one race, the human race. We have falsely separated based on characteristics of color, hair, texture, but there's only one race, the human race. When I look at our country, as you've indicated, and we've seen maps of borders are false. And so when we look at what we are now saying that Latinos or Hispanics are invading from the South, those are native people. Those are indigenous people. As we took over this country, people migrated south. They moved away from the people who were trying to kill them. Now they're trying to come back, and you're acting as though they're people who don't belong, but actually this is their country as well. So we're the foreigner more than they are. Okay.
Good morning. I would like to thank the Center for Diversity in Public Health, Dr. Belcher, Dr. McFadden, and yourself, and all the other speakers for this wonderful information. The TED Talk just blew me away. I would like to know today, right now, these young Native Americans are coming from these horrific conditions and trying to become part of a productive society that from those conditions they won't have. My question is this. If we can put the internet and HBO in these remote sections, why can't we have running water and electricity? Answer me that, please.
Someone has to have the will to do it and the money to do it. The Indian Health Service, which many of you may think you may think that Native Americans have free health care. Yes and no. The Indian Health Service, which is whether or not that's how the money is, this is so complicated, underfunded by at least somewhere between 30 to 50% of its need. So healthcare alone, the federal government doesn't meet its responsibility in that. I get federal dollars. Yeah, so running water, the infrastructure for the Navajo Nation, the infrastructure for this land is fairly non-existent. I mean, the highways bypass native lands. So it's a real struggle for any kind of economy to exist. That is one of the graces of technology, is that if they can get internet service, then there's some potential for our young people who are very creative to come up with ways to have industry in their homes. The water issue, not only can we have water, can we have clean water? So the Gold King mine spill, all of these issues are huge issues. Water and water rights, huge issue. Even in Oklahoma, the water rights was on the newspaper when I was there this August about fighting over who owns the water. Who owns the water and who gets the right to take the water and what are you doing with the water. South Dakota, the Standing Rock Sioux is fighting the pipeline issue right now. So we spend a lot of time fighting battles just to get really basic things in life. So thank you for that statement. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Perhaps you should stand up and introduce yourself to the group.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Elaine Zaman. I do work with the
It's on.
oh, it's not okay. I do work with the Maryland General Assembly, and as I said, I was just blown away by the TED Talks regarding the current state of our Native American Indians, our indigenous people. So I just wanted to follow up to see what more can be done, because I know there's so many problems with social determinants. My senator I work for, Nathan Pulliam, we have social determinants of health in basically District 44, which part of the area that traced the Freddie Gray incident, but social determinants of health, it's just worldwide, it's international, global, it's not local. So I'm just very interested in continuing the conversation and actually taking action to see what we can do, just start doing the things we need to do so that we have health equity across the board. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you put it the best. We are people. We want health and well-being for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's got to be the word to our Congress, our leaders, that this is it's not a gift, it's a right. That everyone has the right to good health. And then you start the arguments about where does that dollar line draw? Does everyone have the right to a plastic surgery nose and a boob job or whatever? But I think basic health care, the right to be able to get up and walk down your stairs, to not be isolated in your home, and to show, I can't wait to see her data, to show what that does economically. That's going to be something that those guys are going to listen to. That's going to be something that's critical. And so I think you probably, last time I was here, I showed the slide that had the tribes of this area. I don't remember them all, but you have lots of streets and lots of names that you probably don't realize are native names, the names of your rivers. All of those at one time were tribes that probably don't still exist. As far as federally recognized tribes in this immediate area, I think the closest are the Lenape of Pennsylvania that still exist. But anytime you can, I have a colleague by the name of Bill Ward, who is an African-American man that grew up on the White Mountain Apache Reservation. And he's married to an Apache woman. And he told me, Teshia, I sit on all these committees and I think, why am I on this committee? They're not doing nothing. And they don't care about Native people. And I'm not Native. I shouldn't be speaking for you. And I said, you know what? There aren't enough of us to sit on every single committee. And so I trust you, Bill Ward, to stand up for me and say, by the way, what are you doing for Native people today? And so anytime you get that opportunity, that's an opportunity that all of us have great gratitude to you for. So thank you. This is for you.
I want to know if you know anything about the Mayan Indians that apparently archaeologists have recently discovered remains in Georgia and in Florida. The civilization, the Mayan civilization, that predated the Central American. But I know, and I've seen it, like lots of little bits and pieces about it, but they're not recognized and understood by the federal government, and not heard about it.
No.
I've seen it on the internet.
Yeah, we'll have to Google it. Somebody Google that. Somebody should Google that right now. Yeah, no, I know nothing. Anybody following that one? Nope. Yeah, we'll have to look it up. Oh, the long stories. Well, I'm not actually, no one included me in those discussions, so I can't talk firsthand about any of that. But, okay, money. So every time that a community comes up to be asked for federal recognition, it's like, oh my God, here come the Indians again, and we have to pay for them, right? So each tribe has to show a documented legacy of existing separate from other communities. And you can imagine at the times there's not a lot of documents around, so that's a very big challenge. The rationale for tribes to want to be federally recognized is money. So trying to get healthcare dollars, trying to get access, trying to get support for housing and other things for people. So it is primarily a money. I think that's the short answer probably.
Well, again, I want to thank Dr. Solomon for talking to us. I'm going to